right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Myself and my coworker here, Craig, we were very excited to bring you this live stream today, where we get the opportunity to discuss design learning with a couple of very influential experts in that field. Joining us today are Remke Klapwijk from the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands and Kay Stables from Goldsmiths University of London. Remke Klapwijk is a researcher, like I said, at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. Prior to this, she received an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from Eindhoven University of Technology before moving on to obtain a PhD in technical public administration activities and societies from Delft University of Technology. She has published numerous articles related to the design process and design learning as an important aspect of technology education. Currently, her work at Delft involves collaboration efforts with schools and to provide innovations aimed at design-based learning in the primary education level. The main themes behind these innovations are creativity in developing ideas, communication in and around the design process, formative assessment of design skills, and teacher competencies, among others. Dr. Klapwijk has a passion for education, and we are very grateful that she has taken the time to provide our cohort of pre-service technology teachers with some unique perspectives on design. Kay Stables is an educational researcher from the UK. She began researching technology-based education in 1986 at Goldsmiths University of London. Digital tools. Research projects she has worked on have targeted primary and secondary schools, both locally and internationally. She has held many positions at Goldsmiths, heading several departments, and at one point, the CEO. She has published several publications amassing over 1,300 citations. We're very grateful for Kay to join us today for our interview. So thank you both.
You're welcome.
All right. So without further ado, if you both are ready, we'll jump right into our first question of this interview. So the first question says, you mentioned that one of the constants that needs to be in place to develop design capability is the need for design to be undertaken in motivating, authentic contexts. How can educators foster these desired environments while operating within the contents or the confines of a curriculum?
Okay, we foolishly didn't decide who was gonna go first on which questions, but do you want me to start on that one, Remke?
Oh, that's excellent.
Okay. When I first read the question, one of my first thoughts was, well, where there's a will, there's a way. And I know that is something that some people are more prepared to take risks and to go outside maybe of the rules a little. Some people aren't. But I think also it depends on the nature of the curriculum. If you could be talking a national curriculum, a provincial curriculum, a curriculum that's just an informal one by the school. So all of those things obviously allow a different, there's much more wriggle room if it's not something that's a very, very narrow curriculum that really is focused around high stakes assessment. That's obviously more of a challenge. But I think at the heart of this is whatever the curriculum is, unless the curriculum is so narrow and tight around knowledge and physical skills, then it's a much more straightforward thing to deal with. Because if you're looking at motivating authentic contexts, then again, talking about the age group that you're looking at is actually quite easy to then start thinking about, well, what's going to motivate? In the chapter, we talk about motivating young children through more of a fantasy setting, like, you're sailing on a ship, you're chased by pirates, there's wild animals where you're stranded on an island. And that's a very easy way for the children to be so engaged in the whole thing that there is no problem at all in the motivate. For them, it's a very authentic context, even if it's an imaginary one. That obviously is a little harder when you move up into the teenage years and you've got to think a little bit more about how are they actually going to be engaged. And so maybe you're then looking at something that may be more factional than fictional, where you're giving some very, very real criteria about what's being achieved here, what the real issues are that need to be addressed, even if as the teacher you've kind of created this whole thing yourself. But then I guess you're needing to step to one side all the time, and you know, keep an eye on what is being expected by the curriculum that you're following. And if it's a very tight curriculum, then it may be that you've got to sort of mark out, okay, there are these specific bits of knowledge that I've got to put in here. And then it's up to you then, I guess, in advance to start really thinking through how, you know, how do you balance out this really, really motivating thing that maybe 16, 17-year-olds may be particularly interested in certain issues around environment, climate, for example, peaceful protests, those sorts of things. And then it's sort of working those two together. But I think, well, Remke may have some stuff to come in on this, but you know, I think that it's where there's a will, there's a way. If you really feel that you want the learners to be really engaged and to really want to get somewhere with the project, so that they really feel motivated, then it's up to the teacher to kind of, you know, balance out the nature of the curriculum with something that's going to really engage the learners.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's certainly been something that's been on the forefront of my mind now when I'm considering going out into schools now in the winter to do an internship myself. It's like, how do I myself come into this school and get these students engaged in a meaningful way, right? So thank you for that answer.
I happened to be at one of our teacher training institutes yesterday, and one of the students, she told me that she had developed a short design project around the sustainable development goals. These are quite important in the Dutch educational system, and she did a project on health and had the children engage in designing a physical game that all sorts of children, and the ones that are very sportive, the ones that like competition, the ones that prefer just to have fun, can enjoy. So yeah, it's really like when you value design learning, then in at least in primary schools, it's easy to find a place.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I can see how it would definitely.
But for secondary, are the students, are you trained for both primary and secondary?
This program that we're involved in is just for the intermediate and secondary levels. So that would be grades 7 to 12 in the school district.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for that answer. We'll move on now to the second question. This question states, challenges and constraints play a key role in design projects for all grade levels. How should educators evaluate a given design scenario to determine the appropriate level of challenge for their students?
Yeah, when we talked about this question, we thought there are sort of two elements to have the appropriate level. One is really has to do with engagement and motivation. So what is the kind of context the students are interested in? Like children up till 10, for example, are very much oriented on animals, for example, or with older children, they will like they prefer other contexts. And there's also an example in our booklet where the challenge was very open. It was about empathy. And then children, the pupils came up with their own context. Maybe Kay, you can tell a little bit, because that's an example from your background.
Yeah, we give an example in the book of working from a very open context or working from quite a closed one, and how important it is for teachers to be able to structure. If it's open, you've got to kind of structure it so that the learners can actually, it's not like I've got to solve a world problem, it's more manageable, but how you move that down. And then also that the kind of, if it's quite a tight design brief, there's got to be room for where the learners are. And so there's an example in there about two examples around empathy, really. The kind of much more open one, where the learners really were coming up with their own working as a group, coming up with their own design challenge based around something that there was a real sense of empathy. And in that particular case, they were it was the group the group that's mentioned are a group of boys who are very concerned about bomb disposal, the dogs of bomb disposal soldiers, and the empathy around for the soldier and how you could protect the dog. Whereas at the other end, it was a much more constrained thing around designing for a charity. But the empathy thing was really important. And I think it's probably fair to say that if you can build in empathy, then you're onto a bit of a winner. And we found that recently with the research that Remke and I've been involved in with teachers, with researchers from different countries, where empathy is there and the learners can really engage with through empathy, they become very, very committed, very quickly committed to a project. We've recently we've had this project running in different schools in different countries with different researchers, and we created personas, and the children could choose the persona they wanted to design for, and the personas were very, very much establishing empathy. So a persona of a little boy who was really terrified of going to the dentist, a persona of somebody who was setting up a restaurant but needed to have somewhere where people could come in and cleanse their hands but not lose the ambience of the. So the empathy thing is actually something that we have increasingly focused on and increasingly realized just what a magic ingredient it is. Very young children right up to, any age group pretty much.
Right, yeah. I can definitely see how that would be very impactful. I feel like it's human nature to want to help other people. So if we can incorporate that at some level into our design process and design challenges, I definitely agree that it would give students that extra level of motivation and engagement.
Yeah, and besides the context, there's also another level that's important. Are they able to design and construct and build? So you also take the material skills and experiences into account. Can they work with wood or the computer drawing program? So that is another, important element. But what we see quite often, that you can give a design challenge that has been developed for young children, and you give it to the older children, and they also really engage. But of course, the nature of their solutions and work looks really different.
Right. Yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, thank you for that answer. We'll move on to the next question we have now. Many schools, particularly those in the rural area of our province, face the challenge of a lack of resources and funding when it comes to the areas of technology education. So how can educators allow students to have that autonomy that we want to give them in the design process while still working with what the schools have available for the teachers to use?
Who's going to go first on this one? Do you want me to go first on this one, Remke?
Yeah, maybe you can tell about the teacher who hadn't had materials for 1 year.
Okay, yeah, that was it. Yeah, I mean, when Remke and I were talking about this one, we were talking about the importance of a mixed diet, and if you've got, so there's I don't know what it's like in Newfoundland, but in England, very often teachers will have a project and it lasts for 7 weeks, and then there's another project and it lasts for 7 weeks, and then there's another project, say with 12, 13-year-olds, and then there's another project and it lasts for 7 weeks. And why? So if you've got a mixed diet of projects, then you can actually manage resources really, really much more easily. So you can have a design without make project, which is just 2 lessons, and all you need are paper, pencils, crayons, maybe stuff like that. You can then have projects where you're doing something in a group, where a group are building something, so you're not using so many resources. And then you can have the kind of like the creme de la creme, the major project of the year, when the resources are still available to be used. You're actually, it's a win-win situation, because it must be so tedious for kids. Okay, this is a really speedy project. We're going to get through this one in 2 lessons, and we're going to, that Remke was referring to somebody who was, when I was back a long time in the day, when I was teaching in school, and a friend who was teaching in a nearby school that had just been built. In her first year of teaching there as a design and technology teacher, they had no workshops because they hadn't been built yet. And she said it was one of the most creative years of her teaching career and of what the children did, because suddenly they had to break the mold, they had to do things differently, and they had to do a lot more with a lot less resources. But again, not kind of trying to repeat, kind of take, this is the model, exciting for the learners, while it's also solving a problem of the limited resources.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge that faces a lot of technology educators in our province. So I really thank you for that answer. That's a very valuable viewpoint for all of us to have going into our internships now in the winter.
Some other solutions, like a rotating system between the schools, like in Rotterdam, is one of our biggest cities. There's hundreds of schools, but they rotate their materials through an organization, so they own less, and that's something that's also possible.
That's an interesting
Or
system.
what we also do is working in layers, so the whole class is involved in designing for a fab lab, for example, a game. But then in the end, the class selects one design that will be really made in the fab lab by a few children. So in this way, they still experience what can be made in a fab lab, and they see the product coming back, and they all feel attached. But not all the children have to travel to the fab lab.
Right. That's an interesting system.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that answer. We'll move on to the next question there now. In this chapter, you talk about using contextual ideas for design challenge, as well as balancing autonomy so that students stay engaged. At what point, if at all, does balancing these ideas overtake the importance of the design challenge?
Remke, do you want to talk about the project time?
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to understand the question again, because in the book we talk about like the needs, like what does a person need to be motivated, and we know from the general literature that autonomy, competence, like being able to do something, and relatedness are all important. Because if you do not feel related to your peers in your team or your class, or to the client you're working for, it's very difficult to be motivated. If you're given autonomy, but it's so open, and you cannot really decide on the direction to take in your project, and you feel not competent, it's also very difficult for students to be engaged. So that's why we talk about balancing, that they're all needed, and there are a lot of things that you can do in your classroom to create autonomy in combination with interest and relatedness. For example, there's one PhD thesis that we refer to, and after a period of designing, the teacher could organize a moment of peer talk. Now, it's not feedback, but just explaining your idea. So the children get information, they're related, they feel more competence. But I think this is not really an answer to your question yet. So maybe you can explain your question to us.
Yeah, so this question was just about, how do teachers, sort of walk that fine line between uh, making sure that students have that autonomy, but they don't sort of run away with a project and get off track and start to get into areas
Ah,
that's not really relevant to maybe the curriculum or what the teachers envision the project being.
There's a thought that's actually just come into my mind, Remke, about again from this recent project that we've been playing around with across, where we have the students that we've been working with. We had them working on their own projects, but in a group of 3 critical friends. And in one of the schools in Sweden, I think it was one of the schools in Sweden, where in the first beginning of the project, one of I think there were 13, 14-year-olds, one went completely off at what the others were like, well, where's he going with this idea? But because the notion of the critical friends and the way that was structured was that you keep pulling back and your friends give you feedback on what you're doing, and they were giving him feedback, and then he came into the next lesson and he said, okay, now I see what the problem with me was, and I see where I was going, and you've helped me to move back and to see where I should be going. So actually using the learners that themselves is also a really good way of doing it. And that we found, just as we found empathy was really powerful, we also found the critical friends concept was powerful, which could be because they're working as a group, but it could be because they're working individually, but they've got a couple of critical friends who periodically the teacher's stopping and asking them to give feedback to each other. And it's a way of kind of balancing autonomy that doesn't just go completely off just doesn't go off the planet somewhere, with actually what it is that is the kind of the focus of what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that? I think it's probably that was the question. I think we probably both were a little bit wonder what's going on there. But do we between us? Do you think we've addressed
Yes.
your?
Oh, yes. Of course. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. That's
or
something. Yeah.
yeah, I was wondering if you were also meaning like maybe you want a certain subject area or content area to be part of the learning process in a design project,
Uh,
or
no, we
or
weren't.
not so
I don't think
much.
we were thinking, discreetly, subject area. We were just thinking more in a general context. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's something uh, that I've encountered myself. I've had colleagues and friends, sort of helped correct my path on my own projects. So that's definitely an important aspect of the design process itself. So yeah, thank you for that answer. Um, so we'll move on to another question here now. Um, in this chapter, you identify 5 key strategies for formative assessment from the Make Design Learning Visible approach. As technology continues to advance rapidly, do you see any of these strategies becoming less effective?
I think we have to smile here because we decided that we would turn that one back on you. Um, like, which of those strategies do you think might become less effective, less valuable? You can say none of them, or you can.
I yeah I feel like if I had more experience in the field of technology education, I'd probably be able to give you a better more profound answer. But really, that's why we came up with this question, because we wanted to see, people with more experience than ourselves give their input on this.
Yeah, we were thinking that they will all stay in place because they seem to be very helpful strategies in learning in general, like in math or language education, but even more so in design and technology education. Because in design and technology education, your projects are very rich and a lot can be learned. But we noticed in the Netherlands that a lot of our teachers would primarily give the children and students feedback on how they cooperated. Like we were thinking there's so much more that you learn. So we thought, what if we make the things that you learn that are a bit more the soft skills, like the 21st century skills, if we could clarify those for both teachers and pupils, like thinking in all directions, like the divergent thinking is something you learn, but you also have to learn how to make decisions, to think about your values, and what if you cannot do, everything at the same time. So that's why we came up with both the design skills. So these are learning goals, but also a sort of, I sometimes call it even a contract with your classroom. Like, okay, in this project, we'll especially focus on, for example, empathy. We have been talking about it, or divergent thinking. And before we embark on a project, we talk about it. What do you do when you are a successful divergent thinker? And have this discussion with your pupils. And we did this with one class. The teacher had a 10-minute discussion, and she asked, what do you do to come up with many and varied and novel original ideas? And the first reaction of one of the pupils was, like, you have to agree. And then the teacher said, when you agree, do you come up with many ideas? You directly have to agree. Oh, okay, no. So they went on. Okay, we have to combine ideas. I should not stick to my own idea. And through this conversation, they really understood this process. And after a brainstorm, we gave them the break because now they knew the learning goal and they could look at their own work, monitor it. Were you successful in this? And they, of course, first they all said yes. But then one guy said, well, all my ideas of the brainstorm are sort of like the ones I had yesterday. They're all a bit the same. And then, the teacher asked, like, who else had a similar problem? And of course, more children had the problem. And then the teacher could ask the children who were successful, like, what did you do? It became very clear that they were made a lot of associations, that they really used the brainstorm tool. And then after this short, like I think we stopped the brainstorm for 10 minutes, then the children went on. And before we did it, I was like, maybe it will really ruin the brainstorm because the creative flow will be absent. But no, many of the children afterwards, they were better able to think in many directions. And then more learning takes place when you sort of, as a teacher, once in a while, select a certain skill and really go clarify the learning goal, collect evidence, look at the evidence, and then give the students feedback. It helps to make them, improve. So, and you can do this through technology, but also without technology. Yeah.
I think also linking that into the 5 formative assessment strategies, I don't know whether we have time to quickly look at this. I think it's the 9th slide that has those 5 up, so that for people who've perhaps not looked at them.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Okay, it's just thinking about those 5, and thinking, well, do any of these would any of these disappear because of kind of rapid development? I don't know. Can people see that, or should I just perhaps people can see that?
Oh,
Okay, so if you look at each of those, with or without technology, why would you not clarify and share the design skills and success criteria? Why would you not provide feedback to move things forward? Why would you not be listing evidence of the learning? And the 2, I think, that we have increasingly found really, really important is activating learners as resources for one another. Why would you not formatively have the students giving feedback to each other? And then why would you not be encouraging self-reflection? So I think in that question, we were thinking, is technology's advancement, unless you're linking this into AI, and then that would maybe take the conversation in a slightly different direction, why would you not still, whatever technology you were or weren't using, why would you not be focusing on those five assessments, formative assessment strategies? I think if people want to follow up more on this, I don't know whether David has also given at some point where there's all of these resources are downloadable from the Delft website, so people might want to look at that and look at examples. But just looking at how everything that we've done, you can pull it back to one or more of those formative assessment strategies as a way of actually moving learners forward, either in their project or in the way in the kind of cognitive skills they're developing, or both. So yeah, I think our quest, that was why we sort of threw it back on you, as well, which ones would you get rid of? Because we can't really see that there's any that aren't valuable.
Yeah, yeah, I was even thinking that the new technologies could give additional tools for this process. For example, one of the tools we have been already using is having design teams during the design process make a picture every 5 minutes, either of their team or of the materials or designs in the making, and then reflect on it and have a talk. And this was amazing because all of a sudden, by looking back at the pictures, they noticed like, oh, they would say, you were so passionate about this idea, you too, that the other 2, we just went with you because we couldn't, get you somewhere else. So as pictures did this, I think maybe new technologies could give other tools that we haven't developed yet.
Right. Yeah, most definitely. Thank you for that answer, and we'll jump right now to an audience question, if that's okay. We got time for one audience question. So the question one of our audience members posed is, how do you believe the principles discussed in this chapter, such as emphasizing human desire for creativity, design, and the importance of a broader curriculum, align with the concept of universal design for learning?
Universal design?
Universal design for learning, if you're familiar with that concept and framework.
I think you may need to say a little bit more about the universal. I mean, say a little bit more about what you mean by universal design.
So I think if I have this right from what this audience question is getting at is that universal design for learning is sort of a framework that we as educators are learning about that includes multiple means of representation, action, and expression. So it's really a framework to allow as many students to access different curriculum as easily as possible.
Okay, so the question again was.
So the question is, how do the principles discussed in your chapter, this question makes note of emphasizing human desire for creativity, design, how do they align with this concept of universal design for learning?
Okay, well, I'll have a stab at this, but it may be, I mean, and again, I'm thinking on the spot. But if you look at all of the early stuff in the chapter when we're talking about the kind of human capability that is there and what's described, almost like the third of the three areas that we kind of all have. That is something that can be that is, in a way, it's generic because it's something that all humans have those capabilities. And desires in a way to kind of, to change things, to develop things, whatever. In terms of the universal nature of that, I guess that depends on where you are and who you are and what culture you've been brought up in and the extent. So I think, I mean, increasingly we've been focusing on the wisdom that comes from indigenous cultures, for example. If you look at that in a kind of a universal context, it would still, you're still talking about the creativity, the desire for change, the desire to improve, and the capability to do that. So I suspect that unless I've gone completely off tangent here, I think really the kind of the nature of the kind of human nature, the capabilities that are there when we're born in various, and need to be nurtured and opened up. But that being there, that's something that is, in a way, is universal. But it very, very much how that actually develops is very much would depend on the context, the culture that you're growing up in, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. That's one of the key points that we've been made aware of UDL is that it very much is a framework that has to encompass a number of different cultures and sort of goes hand in hand with culturally responsive teaching and stuff like that, right? So yeah, thank you for that perspective, that answer. Okay, it seems we've come to the end of our time, so I'd like to once again thank Remke Klapwijk and Kay Stables for joining us and providing their perspective on this important issue of design learning to our cohort of technology education teachers. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you, I guess, for inviting us, and I hope that it's been useful to the students to maybe to engage with our chapter a little more, but also just to get some different ideas.
Yes, most definitely. All right.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and good luck with your studies and also with your engagement in practice with the students.
Yes, thank you so much. All right.